Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. We're tackling cybersecurity this time. We're going beyond just the headlines,
Yeah.
really digging into some recent breaches and vulnerabilities and all that, and really what it means for you listening right now.
Yeah, definitely. We'll break it all down, make it make sense, and hopefully give you some practical advice you can actually use.
All right. So I was looking at all these reports, and one thing just kept jumping out at me.
Hmm.
Hacked accounts.
Yeah.
And so often what's behind those hacked accounts? Phishing and malware.
Sure.
That's still working.
Well, I think that's the thing that's so fascinating is how effective those simple tactics are. Exploit human behavior. That's often the easiest way in for attackers.
Yeah. I guess it's like leaving the door wide open.
Mhm.
And retailers have been hit hard lately. You've got Ahold Delhaize,
Yeah.
and they own a bunch of brands like Food Lion, Stop and Shop, Hannaford, all hit. Millions of customer records exposed. I mean, everything. You're talking names, contact info, even purchase history.
And hot topic. They lost some partially encrypted payment card data. And what's even more unsettling is that the hacker they're going by Satanic is now offering this data on the dark web.
Ugh, that's rough. And it's not just these big retailers.
Right?
We saw Form I-9 Compliance. That's a company that helps with, verifying employee eligibility. They got breached. And guess what they lost? Social Security numbers.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that, keeps you up at night. I mean, it highlights how sensitive the data is that we're talking about, even for companies you might not think about every day.
Right.
And then you have the Mr. Tips breach.
Oh, right.
Now, we don't know for sure if financial data was stolen, but the potential for phishing and identity theft is there. It's very real.
Definitely. And it makes you realize no company is invincible. Even these big tech giants, they can get caught slipping, like AT&T and Snowflake. Hackers stole a ridiculous amount of data, like 50 billion records. They exploited weaknesses in Snowflake's cloud services.
It's interesting, though, because in this case, the authorities actually managed to track down and charge the people responsible.
Really?
Yeah. So that doesn't happen often with these big breaches. So that's a small win for law enforcement.
Yeah, it's nice when someone is held accountable for that, but it does highlight how sophisticated these attacks have become. And speaking of sophisticated, have you heard of this new phishing tool, Go Issue?
Yes, this one is particularly concerning. It specifically targets developers on GitHub. So first, it scrapes email addresses, and then it launches these massive phishing campaigns, but they're designed to, evade those spam filters.
So they put all this work into making it super sneaky. And here's the thing, they're selling this tool, like $700 for a custom version, or you can get the full source code for $3,000. It's kind of creepy to think there's a whole market for this stuff.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. And then you add in the fact that Go Issue is linked to the GitLocker extortion campaign.
Yeah.
It just adds another layer of complexity and danger. The bad guys are always up in their game.
You said it. It makes you want to chuck your computer out the window and never look back. But before you do that,
Okay.
let's talk about something that hits even closer to home. Business email compromise, BEC scams.
These scams are really sneaky because they exploit trust. They often target home buyers who are already stressed out with that whole process.
Right. And the financial fallout can be devastating. Like, there was this family in Melbourne. They lost over $500,000 because scammers hacked into their conveyancer's email and changed the bank details.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then in another case, a woman in South Australia lost $800,000 because of one wrong letter in an email address.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. It really drives home how careful you have to be, especially when money is involved.
Absolutely. I mean, double-checking those bank details, picking up the phone, actually talking to someone, these things can save you a lot of heartache. And enabling multi-factor authentication wherever you can, that's absolutely crucial.
Okay, so the threats are always changing, always evolving. Let's zoom in on some specific vulnerabilities that you really should be aware of.
Okay.
First up, Citrix Recording Manager.
Oh, yeah. Citrix had to scramble to patch two critical vulnerabilities. They're CVE 2024-8068 and CVE 2024-8069. And those could allow unauthenticated remote code execution.
So wait, that means that an attacker could hijack my system without even needing my password?
Yeah, basically.
Not good.
Nope.
And it's not just Citrix. We saw that Schneider Electric found some big problems in their Monocon controllers.
Right, these vulnerabilities, they're CVE 2024-8936, CVE 2024-8937, and CVE 2024-8938. They target the Modbus protocol, and that protocol is used widely in industrial control systems. So, imagine someone messing with those systems. It could cause major disruption.
It's a good reminder that cybersecurity goes way beyond just our computers.
Exactly, and even those seemingly boring software updates can have huge security implications. Like, look at Adobe's recent Patch Tuesday.
What happened there?
They had to fix 48 critical vulnerabilities across their entire product line. Photoshop, InDesign, even Adobe Commerce.
Oh, wow.
And one particularly nasty flaw, CVE 2024-49521, affects Adobe Commerce. This one could let attackers execute arbitrary code. It's just another perfect example of why keeping your software updated is non-negotiable.
Agreed. And speaking of updates, SAP also patched a high-severity vulnerability in their web dispatcher component.
Yeah, this flaw, it's CVE 2024-47590, is a cross-site scripting vulnerability, so attackers could use that to hijack user sessions, and they could even gain remote access to the server.
It feels like every week there's a new critical vulnerability to worry about.
I know, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's no wonder CISOs are feeling the heat. In fact, we're seeing more and more CISOs taking out personal indemnity insurance.
What, like to protect themselves?
Yeah, as the risk of breaches increases and the pressure from boardrooms keeps rising.
That's a sign of the times, isn't it? And the stats are pretty alarming. 61% of organizations are reporting breaches due to ineffective policies or controls.
And get this, 90% of CISOs are expected to improve security assurances, but only 55% feel confident they can actually do it.
Wow.
It's a tough position to be in. And this culture of blaming CISOs when things go wrong,
Yeah.
it's not helping.
No, it's not.
If CISOs are constantly fearing they'll be held personally responsible for breaches, we're going to see a lot of talented people leaving the cybersecurity field.
Right. It's a problem that needs addressing, for sure. But let's wrap up this part of our deep dive with some insights from the FBI, CISA, and NSA.
Oh yeah, those guys. They just released a joint advisory on the most exploited vulnerabilities of 2023. And there's a worrying trend. 12 out of the top 15 were zero-day exploits.
Wait, you mean attackers were already using these flaws before anyone even knew they existed?
Exactly. Some of the big ones include CVE 2023-3519 in Citrix NetScaler, CVE 2023-23397 in Microsoft Outlook, and CVE 2023-25350 in Papercut MFNG.
That's a sobering thought. It's a reminder that even the best protected systems have weaknesses.
And that staying informed about these threats is absolutely critical.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Breaches, vulnerabilities, the pressure on CISOs. But the big question is, what does all this mean for you? How can you protect yourself in this wild west of the digital world? We'll tackle that in part 2 of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about zero-day exploits. When hackers are already using flaws before anyone even knows about them.
Right. It's a lot to take in, all this information, all these threats. But knowledge is power, right? Like the more we understand all this, the better we can protect ourselves.
Exactly. And the good news is there are lots of simple but effective steps you can take. Let's start with the basics. Passwords.
Ugh, passwords. Such a pain, but so important.
I know.
So what's the best approach? Like, should we be changing them every month, using all those crazy combinations of symbols and numbers?
Well, you don't have to change them that often. The key is to use strong, unique passwords for every single account. And by unique, I mean don't use the same one for multiple sites.
Yeah, no, it's a lot to keep track of.
It is. But a password manager can be a lifesaver. Think of it like a digital vault for all your passwords.
Yeah, they've made my life so much easier. Can't recommend those enough. And while we're on the topic of account security, two-factor authentication. Is that really enough these days?
Two-factor authentication, or 2FA, is absolutely essential. Like any account that offers it, you should use it. It's like adding a deadbolt to your front door. So even if someone gets your password, they still can't get in without that second verification like a code from an app or a text message.
Right, so that's a backup plan.
Exactly.
But let's be real. The attackers are getting more sophisticated all the time. Are strong passwords and 2FA really enough?
Well, you're right. We can't rely on those alone. We also need to be aware of the tactics they use to trick us, like phishing.
Right.
Phishing attacks are still one of the most common ways hackers gain access to accounts and steal sensitive information.
So how do we spot those phishing attempts? What should we look out for?
Just be cautious of any emails or messages that seem even slightly off. If you're not expecting an email or if it's asking you to click on a link or download a file, just be extra careful.
Right.
Don't be afraid to hover over links to see where they really lead. And if you're ever unsure about an email, contact the sender directly. Verify it.
Better safe than sorry. Okay, what about malware? How do we
Yeah.
protect ourselves from those nasty bugs?
Malware is a major threat, but there are things you can do to minimize your risk. First and foremost, keep your operating system and all your software up to date. Those updates often include security patches that fix known vulnerabilities.
So those annoying updates are there for a reason.
Exactly. They're like your cybersecurity vaccines.
I like that.
And be careful what you download. Only download from trusted sources and be wary of clicking on links or attachments from unknown senders. It's also a good idea to have a reputable antivirus program installed, just as an extra layer of protection.
Okay, so we talked about passwords, two-factor authentication, phishing, malware. What else? What else can we do to kind of boost our defenses?
Backups. Backups are so often overlooked, but they're so crucial. If you ever get hit with a ransomware attack or something like that, a good backup can be a lifesaver.
So how often should we back up our data, and where should we keep those backups?
You should aim for regular backups, at least once a week, if not more frequently,
Okay.
and store them in a safe and secure location, preferably offline, like an external hard drive or in the cloud. That way, even if your computer is compromised, your data is still protected.
Okay, so this is all great advice, but it does sound like a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
Can be overwhelming, especially if you're not, super tech savvy.
I hear you. And that's why cybersecurity awareness training is becoming so important. It's not enough to just have strong technical controls in place.
Yeah.
You need to educate people about the threats and best practices, whether it's at work or at home.
Yeah, it's about empowering people to protect themselves, giving them the knowledge to make smart decisions.
Exactly.
But let's be honest, cybersecurity can be stressful.
Oh, for sure.
All these threats, all this responsibility, it can take a toll. What can we do to kind of protect our mental health in this digital age?
That's a really important point. Cyber attacks aren't just about data and technology. They can have a real impact on people's lives.
Yeah.
We hear stories all the time about people losing their life savings to BEC scams, businesses getting crippled by ransomware attacks. The psychological toll can be significant. Victims often feel violated, betrayed, and powerless.
That makes sense. It's easy to overlook the emotional side of all this,
Yeah.
But it's important to remember there's no shame in being a victim of a cyber attack. It can happen to anyone, and there are resources to help you recover.
Absolutely. There are organizations dedicated to supporting victims of cybercrime, and law enforcement is working hard to bring these cyber criminals to justice. If you find yourself in that situation, please know that you are not alone and there are people who can help.
And we're back for the last part of our cybersecurity deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, the threats out there, vulnerabilities, even the emotional side of it all. But let's focus on solutions here. What can you actually do to protect yourself? It's easy to feel powerless, but you're not.
No, not at all. It's all about being proactive, taking those small but important steps to build up those defenses.
Yeah, it's like building a house. You don't want to skimp on the foundation.
Exactly. So let's recap some key takeaways, turn them into actionable advice. Number 1, passwords. I know we've said it a million times, but strong, unique passwords for every single online account you have.
And a password manager, seriously, folks, it can be a game changer. Think of it as like your digital vault for all those complex passwords.
Right. Next up, two-factor authentication. If a site offers it, use it. Super simple, just adds that extra layer of security, that safety net, in case your password does get compromised.
Now let's talk about phishing. Those emails or messages that just seem a little off. If you're not expecting it, or it's pushing you to click a link or download something, red flag. Proceed with caution.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to hover over those links to see where they actually lead. And if you're ever unsure, reach out to the sender directly, double check.
Always better to be safe than sorry.
Oh.
And speaking of safe, keep your operating system and your software updated. Those updates, they often include those security patches that fix known vulnerabilities.
It's like keeping your cybersecurity vaccines up to date.
Exactly. Okay, something that often gets overlooked. Backups.
Oh, backups are so important. It's your lifeline if you get hit with ransomware or just lose data somehow. Aim for regular backups, weekly at least, and store them securely.
Okay.
An external hard drive, a cloud service, ideally. That way, even if something happens to your computer, you're good. Your data's safe.
It's like insurance for your digital life. Now, cybersecurity awareness training, that's becoming more and more important these days.
Yeah, it's not just about having those strong technical defenses. You need to educate everybody at work, at home, about the threats and how to stay safe. Because human error, that's still one of the biggest weak points in any security system.
So it's about knowledge, empowering people with knowledge to make those smart decisions.
Exactly.
We covered a lot today, breaches, tips, all of that. But let's not forget the human element here. Cybersecurity can be stressful, all those threats.
Absolutely. And we've seen how devastating the impact can be. It's important to take care of yourself, prioritize your well-being,
Right.
Make sure you're getting enough sleep, eating healthy, taking breaks, and don't hesitate to reach out for support if you're feeling overwhelmed. Remember, cybersecurity is a marathon, not a sprint.
Well said. Before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. Cybersecurity isn't just about technology, it's about people.
That's a great point. Technology provides the tools, but ultimately, it's people who make the decisions that affect our security.
We need to cultivate that culture of awareness and responsibility at work, in our personal lives. If we can do that, we'll be well on our way to a safer, more secure digital world.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's a wrap for our cybersecurity deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay safe out there in the digital world.